Hello, boys and girls. So happy to see you all today. We're going to go ahead and get started with our lesson. All right, so I'm going to share my screen and we're going to see what our goals are for today. All right, so make sure that you are paying attention so that you can learn, so that your brains can grow. All right, here we go. So our goals for today are to learn about a period in music where the music was very, very fancy. We're going to learn about two people that composed music during that time as well. All right, so our special words for today are going to be the Baroque period, and the second word is going to be composer. All right. So let's look at a timeline. So this says musical periods in history. So what this means is that the majority of the music that was written during these periods, they all were written using kind of like a similar pattern, so to speak. All right, so we have the medieval period that was from the year 800 to 1450. Then we had the Renaissance period that was the year 1450 to 1600. Then we have the Baroque period that was from 1600 to 1750, classical period, the year 1750 to 1820, the Romantic period, 1820 to 1910, Impressionist, 1870 to 1910, and now we are in the modern period of music, which started in 1910, okay? So let's check out this song that's all about musical periods.
The Baroque period,
1600 to 1750,
the classical period,
1750 to 1820,
romantic period,
1820 to 1910,
N-U-S-I-C-A-M-P-E-R-I-O-D-S. Baroque was a fancy time. Bach was in his prime. The fancy Baroque period. Baroque was a fancy time. Bach was in his prime. The fancy Baroque period. N-U-S-I-C-A-M-P-E-R-I-O-D-S. N-U-S-I-C-A-M-P-E-R-I-O-D-S. Classical had balance and had poise, perfection, beauty, symmetry, not noise. Classical had balance and had poise, perfection, beauty, symmetry, not noise. N-U-S-I-C-A-M-P-E-R-I-O-D-S. N-U-S-I-C-A-M-P-E-R-I-O-D-S. Romantic period, bigger and more grand. Passion and love, always at hand. Romantic period, bigger and more grand. Passion and love, always at hand. N-U-S-I-C-A-M-P-E-R-I-O-D-S. N-U-S-I-C-A-M-P-E-R-I-O-D-S. The Baroque period,
1600 to 1750,
classical period,
1750 to 1820,
romantic period,
1820 to 1910.
All right, so in that super cool song, they kind of gave us a snippet of what each of those three musical periods were: the Baroque period, the classical period, and the Romantic period. All right, so now we are going to check out a little bit of this video about the Baroque period.
During the Renaissance period, Leonardo da Vinci painted me, the Mona Lisa. Music was played by troubadours with lutes. Singers performed madrigals. Michelangelo was creating his masterpieces. Inventions included the printing press, eyeglasses, and gunpowder.
But during the 17th century, music began to change. People began to dress differently. String instruments were grouped together in what were called orchestras. The harpsichord was added to almost every piece of music, and it sounded like this. Thank you. This was a time of fancy music, fancy buildings,
Fancy hair, fancy pants,
Fancy dogs.
well, not quite fancy dogs, but fancy everything else. Welcome to the Baroque period.
The Baroque period.
I'm so excited I'm joined by Madame Elizabeth. We shall do a Baroque greeting. Very fancy. Now, in the Baroque period, they would fancy everything up a bit. They even fancied up music, and they did it by adding trills. What is a trill? I hear you cry. A trill is a fast wobble shared with the note above it. I'll show you. Very fancy, a trill. Another thing they used to add to their music was the turn. The turn is a bit like a wave of the ocean. It goes along, up, below, and back to the same note. Listen to this. That was a turn. Again, very fancy. And then they added appoggiaturas. Appoggiatura. Now, an appoggiatura is a note, a little note, before the main note that you want to sing. And that makes it fancy again. Listen to this. So a trill, a turn, and an appoggiatura. Now, we're going to add those three fancy Baroque bits to a famous tune, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Off we go.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are.
Very fancy.
If the Baroque period was a cake, it would be fancy. A fancy Baroque cake, 1600 to 1750.
Get in! Look at that! The Baroque period, 400 years ago, 1600 to 1750. Look on there. That is Vivaldi. He was one of the greatest composers of the Baroque period.
That is my music. Don't we know it? Ugh.
He loved to include trills, turns, and appoggiaturas in his music. Hang on a minute. I wonder what it was like to live 400 years ago.
In the beginning of the Baroque period, William Shakespeare was writing plays in England. And Louis XIV was the fanciest and most famous king of France to ever live. He owned 1,000 wigs. But he only wore them one at a time. There were no dentists. If you had a bad tooth, the barber pulled it. After he cut your hair. There were no forks. There was no electricity. Everything was done by candlelight, which means there was no TV. Hey, what's the big deal?
So we've got Shakespeare, fancy buildings, fancy this, fancy that. The Baroque period, quick! To the phone box! Hang on, what are you doing here?
I can't get back to the Baroque period. I'm stuck in a time warp.
Right, stay here, I'll be back.
No, I'm coming with you.
Come on! Johan! This way. So, in the Baroque period, they used the harpsichord.
Yes, the harpsichord. The strings are plucked by a piece of goose feather. Here, take a look.
Right, so when I hit a key, the goose feather plucks the string. Cool.
I cut the pluckers for my dad. When a piece of music is being played, the bass notes are played by... Look, here's one.
Yeah, the cello. Right, you play the bass notes, I'll play the harpsichord. 1, 2.
The cello plays the bass notes, and the harpsichord plays the chords in rhythm.
A bit like the bass and drums in a rock band.
A rock band? What is that, a band of rocks? That's crazy. Wait till I tell my dad.
Who is your dad?
He's Johann as well. Johann Sebastian Bach. You won't have heard of him.
He's Bach's son.
The most famous composers of the Baroque period were Bach, Handel and Vivaldi. Most of them wrote music for rich kings, princes or the church. They wrote choir pieces, orchestra pieces, organ pieces and were prolific, which means they did a lot of music writing. Bach was a master at writing fugues, which are a bit like rounds.
You mean like row, row, row your boat?
Sort of. They were like musical puzzles. You take a little bit of tune. Then you start that tune at a different point in the same piece. He wrote loads. He was fugue mad. Vivaldi wrote the Four Seasons, a fancy Baroque piece that had 4 sections all about the seasons of the year. And Handel wrote a piece called The Messiah. You may have heard it playing in your house when your dad gets a pay raise.
Look at that! Where did that come from? Thank my lucky stars! Woohoo!
Handel, Vivaldi, or Bach, Johann's dad, was some of the greatest Baroque composers. In fact, in the Baroque period, the orchestra was just starting. There was only 3 violins, 3 violas, which were a bit bigger and lower pitched than violins, 3 cellos, 2 double basses.
Ready?
Hang on. A harpsichord, 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 1 bassoon, a timpani player who didn't really do very much, and that's about it.
My dad adds a trumpet and a horn sometimes, too.
And clarinets came along a bit later in the Baroque period. Now today, we've added a few more players.
No one sits on chairs either, but the harpsichord does stay in the middle.
Wow. Sorry. Now, also, in the Baroque period, there were no women in the orchestra either. But for now, we'll keep it as it is.
My dad wrote this piece. It's called Air on a G String.
Great. Well, seeing as your dad wrote it, why don't you conduct it?
Conducting? What is that? The person on the harpsichord is the leader.
I guess that's me. Okay, let's hit it. Air on a G string by Bach. Here we go. Hear how the harpsichord plays the chords and the rhythm, and the cello or bass plays the steady bass part. That's a great way to recognise Baroque period music. Listen. Vivaldi's up there, Handel's up there. I've got this goose feather, which is used to make the pluckers for harpsichords. You've got the clarinet. We'll put that at the end of the Baroque period because it didn't come along till later. Anything else?
And a bass.
Yeah, and a bass. And also, there's a picture of Bach up there.
Where did you get a picture of my dad?
Your dad? Bach was one of the greatest composers to ever live.
No, he's just my dad. I have to get back to the Baroque period. I have a test in school in 10 minutes.
Right, well, get into the phone box, dial 1720, pick up that big black thing, put it to your ear, and shout, "Dad!" Like that. Off you go. Oh, and give your dad one of them, and give me one of them.
He's gone back to the future.
Back in a time. Did he say, "I'll be back"?
Oh, no, you did it. You did it. Yes, you did.
Yeah, and I feel a wealthier man for going Baroque.
No, that
All right, boys and girls. So that video was all about the Baroque period. And as we saw during that time, things were different. The music was made to be very fancy, and the person that played the harpsichord was the leader of the band, okay? So this says, talk to Vivaldi. So we know that he was a composer during the Baroque period. And again, Baroque period was emphasized as like fancier music, and they had lots of fugues where the music repeated itself, okay?
Do you like my red hair? I was known as Il Preteroso, or the Red Priest.
So Vivaldi, he had red hair.
I lived during the Baroque period.
And he lived during the Baroque period.
I was a virtuoso violinist, which means I was really good.
So he was very, very good on the violin.
My most famous piece is called The Four Seasons.
All right, so again, so the Four Seasons, which we're going to check out today, is his most well-known piece of music that he composed, okay? We'll come back to this in a second, but I want you just to look at it. So again, we have 4 seasons: springtime, summer, autumn, and winter. And so Vivaldi, he wrote a piece of music for every season, okay? But like I said, we're gonna come back to that in a moment here. Let's go to where he lived. It says, find and click Europe on the map. Let's start over here. Oh, that's not Europe, that's North America. That's not Europe, that is South America. Not it either, that's Africa. That's Australia. That is Europe, okay? It says this is Europe, the area where Vivaldi lived. So some fun facts. So where he lived was in Italy, and it says pizza was first made in Naples in the 1860s. Fun fact number 2, Italy has more hotel rooms than any other country in Europe. Italy has over 3,000 museums. And in Italy, the average Italian eats 55 pounds of pizza each year. Oh my goodness. All right, so a little bit more about Vivaldi. He was born in 1678. He learned how to play the violin when he was young. He studied to become a priest, but that only lasted a year. Okay. Then he got a job at an orphanage. And at the orphanage, he was a music teacher like me. But in 1716, he got a big promotion. And in 1723, he wrote his most famous piece called The Four Seasons. And in 1741, he passed. Let's go back to his song called The Four Seasons. All right, so let's look at the scenes. In spring, you see what? Trees are blooming, flowers are everywhere. Let's listen to it. Okay, so after spring, then we have summer. All right, and so in summer, we see the trees are bright green. We have sunny skies. See the grass is everywhere. Now let's listen to the piece of music called Summer that Vivaldi composed. All right, after summertime, then what season do we have after summer? Yep, then after summer, then we have autumn, the fall time. And that's where what happens? Well, let's look at the difference in the picture. We see that the sky is a little bit darker and the leaves have changed color, like yellow and orange and red. And we also see that the grass is not bright green anymore as well. Let's now listen to Vivaldi's song, Autumn. Notice that in autumn, things kind of slowed down a little bit because the summer song was faster. Autumn's a little bit slower. Then after autumn, we have what season? Yeah, we have winter. Now we don't see any leaves on the tree and the grass is covered by snow, as well as the sign winter itself. To pause it here. All right, so now you're going to get a piece of paper that looks like this. And it says The Four Seasons by Vivaldi. Make sure that you put your name where it says name up here, okay? So it says, while listening to the four pieces, we just listened to them. I'll play it again for you too. It says, draw Vivaldi and the scenes from each season. So in the middle, you're going to draw a picture of him, okay? So you can draw a picture of him with red hair, or you can draw a picture of him with gray hair, okay? We do know that when he was younger, his hair was red. This first one says spring, so you're gonna draw a springtime scene. Then it says summer, draw the summer, how that looks, all right? And then we went to the autumn, which you can also call fall, draw a picture of that here. And then down here, draw a picture of the winter scene. All right, so as the papers are being passed out to you right now, I'm going to play it one more time. All right, so go ahead and you can start getting your papers passed out to you. You should have your materials, your crayons and pencils in the middle of the tables. All right, let's listen to spring again. You can go ahead and start working once you get your paper. Things are just waking up, right? Animals are coming out of hibernation. Birds are chirping. Okay, then after spring, we have summer. Everything is moving around. Things are moving fast. All right, and then after summer, we have fall time. We have the autumn, where things are slowing down a little bit. Then leaves and grass will change colors. Okay. Slow pace. And then after fall time, we have winter. That's the season that we're in right now. Things are even covered by ice, coldness, snow. All right, so now you should have your papers. They'll look like this, okay? So if you didn't already start, go ahead and get started. So write your name up here. In the middle, gonna draw a picture of Vivaldi, and I'll show you that again too. And under each of the sections, spring, summer, autumn, and winter, you're gonna draw a scene from that. What comes to your mind when you think of those seasons and when you heard Mr. Vivaldi's music for all of those seasons? All right, let me show you his picture again. All right, so this is Vivaldi.
Do you like my red hair?
That's him.
I was known as Il
Hair.
Preteroso,
Okay.
or the Red Priest.
All right, so go ahead and get started on your paper. Make sure to do a great job and add details to your picture. All right, because I will be looking at it when I return. All right, take care. Do what you're supposed to do. Do a great job. Make me proud. Okay. All right. Bye.